5G network will enable a plethora of services and will unlock the digital economy in India. The need now is to focus on 5G use cases along with upgrading 4G networks with technologies to support and nurture new opportunities. Our next panel discussion is around 5G deployment and readying use cases. I would like to invite Danish Khan, Assistant Editor, ETTelecom, to moderate this discussion. Over to you, Danish.
Hello and welcome to the Economic Times Telecom's Digital Telco Summit. We have this very important panel to discuss the 5G preparedness and preparing for 5G use cases for India and in India. So to discuss this panel, we have Mr. Shyam Mardikar, who is Group CTO of Mobility at Reliance JUio, Mr. Babum, DDG at DoT, Mr. Abhay Karandikar, who is Director IIT Kanpur, Mr. Randeep, Raina, who is CTO of Nokia India, and Mr. Mizrahi, who is Executive VP at Ribbon Communication. So I'm starting the panel, and my first question is to you, Mr. Mardikar. So as a telco, what sort of efforts are being made by Reliance JUio for 5G and developing the 5G use cases in the country? So be it the network or developing the use cases, if you could just inform us about the preparedness of the telco so far.
Danish, thanks for the question. 2-3 things I'd like to start with. Fundamentally, in telecommunication, every 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen a kind of sea change in which the topology kind of evolves, the overall architecture kind of evolves. And this has been happening since last 2 decades now, from the time when we moved from 2G to 3G to 4G, and now we're on the anvil of going to 5G. There are 2 or 3 very, very specific tracks towards getting the readiness to the next generation, if I may, of technology before we actually offer it to the end customers. First and foremost, I think one of the most important aspects is the infrastructure readiness, because if you start with new equipment, if you start with new radio, if you start with new ability to backhaul, I think what we've been doing over past few years needs a rehaul. Thankfully, from a Reliance JUio perspective, we have always been a state-of-the-art organization from an architecture perspective, an all IP network to start with, which is giving us a very, very clear head start towards our readiness on 5G. The fiber penetration, which is another one of the most important critical levers for getting 5G operationalized, is also playing to our advantage. We had heavily invested in getting our sites, our base stations fiberized, connected them with all kinds of redundancy and all kinds of ability to recover from fiber cuts, which are so common in India. So basically, from an infrastructure perspective, I think with all the advantages we have got, I think the only thing which we are now aligning ourselves to understand what kind of footprint we need to create and what kind of then fine tuning towards this existing infrastructure, which we have been building over the last 6-8 years to service our 400 million customers on 4G today, and then 5G tomorrow is going to happen. The other important thing I think which we are looking at is the power readiness, because most of the new radios will start consuming more power, and getting the sites upgraded to handle those new radios will be another point on the infrastructure side. So from a fiber perspective, from an all IP perspective, from a bar perspective, the first lever is getting around the infrastructure readiness for 5G. Once that is done, I think the rest is more or less can go with a clockwork. You need to identify the right set of topology for giving the radio coverage, radio capacity, both outdoor, indoor, to all sorts of devices. Understand the kind of use cases which are coming up, which needs to be serviced, and then align your overall life cycle towards upgrading the customers and getting new customers on 5G. So this is an end-to-end big plan, a big transformation project, with the help of all basic advantages we have got, and with the help of technology change which we are looking at. I believe we are really in a good position to kind of move on very seamlessly from our existing 4G network with the scale and capability we have towards a brand new 5G network.
So my next question is to Mr. Babu. So I would like to understand like how government is working with all the stakeholders in terms of developing 5G use cases. There are 5G test beds as well for developing use cases. So if you could just update the panel and viewers like what the government is up to so far in terms of developing those India-specific 5G use cases and to enable the networks?
Thank you, Danish. And I'm happy to be part of this discussion and panel where we all know and we have been talking very intensively about the scope and importance of 5G for the country and for people, especially in the Digital India program. Thanks very much, for arranging this event to bring us together. As Shyam told, with regard to 5G, that making infrastructure ready is one of the key areas, from supply side. But at the same time, to enable more investments and more infrastructure to roll out, yes, usage cases and, that India-specific relevance, from the context of usage cases, where a lot of work has been happening globally, from OEM, as well as local bodies. They have been extensively working through the domestic as well as international partnerships about usage cases. Some of them, of course, they are ready. When anybody looks at 3GPP, either 4G advanced documents or 5G documents, taking into consideration different capabilities of 5G, yes, a big basket of usage cases are available, which may be person specific, enterprise specific, governance specific, service delivery specific, as well as quality of service specific. So in that background, yes, your point is very right. What is that, we are all doing in building collaboration bridges among the partners, in especially strengthening this portfolio of India-specific usage cases. Yes, I think one of experts was mentioning in one of the meetings that 5G is nothing but collaboration. When we look at the specification, the context of 5G when it was developed, unlike let's say the 4G or 3G era, where more focus was only about voice as well as enhancing the data rates from G to G. 5G is from beginning itself, the context was about what is that communication technology can bring near real-time sense in different industry verticals, how it can help in terms of industry 4.0, health, education, smart cities, governance, resource management. Yes, these are all some of the important areas which have been, been given focus about. You also mentioned about, consortium testbed, which is already in final stages, where different academia members as well as industry members have come together. We have got here Professor Abhay Karandikar as well, who can vouch for the competencies which they have demonstrated in building 5G individual subsystems as well as systems, where now work is in progress with regard to what's called proving end-to-end performance, so that industry can come and make use of this infrastructure as a white box test bed. Means I can go with an algorithm, I can go with a subsystem in this end-to-end infrastructure setup where we can test and test my product and equipment. And coming to the specific usage cases, yes, you may be knowing that Department of Telecom is already has initiated this 5G hackathon, where evaluation is already in I should say final stage. When I looked at the contributions which came from the industry members as well as students, individuals, as well as the employees of the industry working in this particular sector, lot of new areas. The areas what I mentioned, we are getting them nominations, which look to be very, very good, and we look forward for finalizing those lists as well as taking industry into confidence to try them and as well as mentor them and perhaps bring them onto live networks. At this moment, a lot of work is happening. Yes, I repeat once again, collaboration is a key issue between the academia partners, industry, as well as experts. And we also seek a lot of international cooperation, where good amount of efforts have already gone into place about building usage cases. We are open to listen as well as take your inputs into consideration. Thanks, Danish.
Sure, sure. So, Mr. Karandikar, so Mr. Babu mentioned academia's role in developing those use cases and then bringing the consortium together. So, how has been the role so far of academia? Do you think that the role has been instrumental in doing the development so far that we have seen in terms of 5G development in the country?
The academia's role has been twofold. One is, I think, as Mr. Kishore Babu said, that there has been a pan-academia efforts, pan-IIT and other R&D labs efforts to develop and set up a 5G testbed. And as a part of this, several institutions like IIT Bombay, IIT Kanpur, IIT Delhi, IIT Madras, IIT Hyderabad, then Center for Excellence in Wireless Technology, CBT at Chennai, and Samir and CDAC and CDOT, they have come forward, and there is an effort that is going on to set up a 5G testbed. The other efforts from the academia have been in contributing to the 5G standards. As a matter of fact, the low mobility, large cell use case configurations that was finally presented by India to ITU in IMT 2020, that also came out of the academic efforts. And finally, of course, we got on board all stakeholders of the country, including, the industry and telecom operators as well. So these were, two large efforts. Of course, as Kishore Babu mentioned, that one of the important aspects of these testbeds where operators can do field trials and vendors also can do field trial is actually the availability of the spectrum. And that was a committee that was set up by the DoT under my chairmanship to set up a policy for experimental spectrum licensing. And we submitted a report, in sometime in May, and finally in June, the Digital Communications accepted, and the Department of Telecom has notified, that policy as well. And that policy has really liberalized, I would say, the grant of the experimental spectrum license for carrying out such testbed activities. And I believe that the operators and the vendors will take advantage of the liberalization of the policy that the government of India has really done for doing the, as a really a big step forward in the direction of doing the ease of business for in the area of 5G. In fact, that committee has also submitted its recommendation as a part 2 for developing the regulatory sandboxes. And these sandboxes, when they are set up, they will actually further enable the development and setting up of the 5G testbeds in different parts of the country. So I would say, these have been big contributions from the academia. Of course, right from beginning, when the telecom centers of excellence were set up in different IITs, academia has been closely working with the industry, both the telecom operators as well as the vendors. So I see that a kind of a momentum has been created in the country with the participation from, I would say, with the enthusiastic participation from all stakeholders, including, the tremendous support that we have got from the government and the Department of Telecom. And as Kishore Babu rightly mentioned, that 5G is not going to be just a communication technology like for voice or data, but it is going to enable an all-pervasive digital connectivity in various domains: agriculture, health sector, manufacturing, industry, and so on. And therefore, in that sense, it is going to be much more than just voice and data communication. So I believe that we would really see a road to, in a true sense, the digital India.
Yeah, sure. So my next question is to Mr. Raina. So being a vendor, there have been several announcements on the 5G front, how Nokia has been forming partnerships with startups, with IT companies to develop 5G use cases. I think Wipro was one, and there were other announcements as well. So how has been the progress so far, Mr. Raina, when it comes to Nokia's efforts in India to develop those use cases and the ecosystem around the 5G services?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danish. I think a great question from an India standpoint in terms of what will be relevant to India from a use case standpoint. And while there are more than 80 commercial networks now, launched globally, there is some experience that has come out of those networks, but that predominantly has been a pure play enhanced mobile broadband experience and fixed wireless access as a complementary service, to the consumers in different parts of the world. But when we look at India, it certainly does take learnings from the global marketplace. But given the demography and geography of India, the use cases will have to be customized to meet the Indian demands. And Kishore Babu sir already talked about what government is doing in terms of incubating startups, and have done that hackathon to promote and get some ideas on board in terms of what will be relevant to India. We at Nokia are also taking some steps in this direction. We already have a 5G lab in Bangalore, where we have already an equipment which is kind of operational, in the sense that we are already doing a lot of software development out here itself. The second part that we have is created an IoT Center of Excellence, where we believe that for 5G to flourish, IoT has to be embedded as part of that game plan. And in that area, we have an innovation garage in Bangalore, where we invite startups, our own R&D folks, to come up with some ideas and generate some products and use cases which will be available for India. So from a partnership standpoint, it's not just limited to Wipro. We have had announced that during IMC 2019, but post that we have tied up with multiple partners who will play equal part in this ecosystem play, where it is not just spanning to farming or agriculture, but also going towards telemedicine, industry 4.0 applications as well. So from that from that standpoint, Danish, a dedicated setup in terms of incubating those ideas, getting them to the test beds, and then eventually, as field trials happen in India, we are working with our customer partners in India of enabling those through our collaborations with the partners that we have on board. So having said that, it's not only, I think the government, operators, OEMs, and the industry stakeholders will have to play an equal role in this, in terms of getting those use cases to the market. And India, by virtue of it being so diverse, I think it could pan across agriculture, medicine, and e-education could be one of the best use cases that we see will happen post-pandemic. And that's something that we are already working on at Nokia.
Sure. So Mr. Mizrahi, my next question is to you. Being a global company, you would have seen how 5G is developing, and you must be involved in other network as well. So how do you compare the global situation right now when it comes to 5G deployment and development, and India situation, how India could benefit from other countries learning, as Mr. Raina just mentioned? So if you would like to just shed some light on that.
Actually, when we're talking about 5G, we forget that in the next 5 to 10 years, our world is going to change significantly. It will impact almost every aspect of our life as an individual, as well as in the enterprise market and anything that actually we do. So when we are looking on India, India is a bit different than the majority of the market. Let's look on high level on India. Fixed broadband is very limited in India. We are talking about 20 million customers versus more than 650 million wireless customers. Another example that I would like to add on top of it is what happened in the last few months. We ran into the COVID-19 situation, and many people moved from working from the office to working from home. That means that it changed completely the traffic pattern across the network. And 5G will play a key role on that, and because we need a network that can provide broadband connectivity anywhere, anytime, across the network. This is something that we learned not only from for the Indian market, for the global market, but in India specifically, it's impact sometimes even more because of the population density. Another aspect which I would like to mention also is the enterprise market. The enterprise market is evolving significantly. We'll see the network, the private networks going through modernization to support new type of services that require high capacity. We will see a new type of machines that will be moving in the facility, which today are not supported in the network. So 5G will be playing a key role also on the enterprise market. So when I'm looking on the India market, I think that broadband connectivity for both the residential as well as for the enterprise and private network is key use case. Another use case which I think it's important for the Indian market is the support for Internet of Things for a variety of applications. But maybe we'll mention one like smart cities. We'll have video surveillance, a variety of sensors, high-speed internet across the city. Public transportation can enjoy Internet of Things. So I think when we are looking on 5G in India, there are a variety of applications and use cases that will be supported. But if I have to pick two, I think that broadband connectivity and Internet of Things are one of the key use cases for the Indian market.
So COVID has changed the way we operate, the way we use certain services. So Mr. Mardikar, my question is to you, how being a telco, you have seen this whole transformation or maybe a shift in terms of traffic and the use cases. Do you think that this COVID can lead to certain use cases which 5G will enable in coming time?
I think, Danish, one of our biggest learnings over the last 4-5 months is the way to make that point slightly more sharper, the traffic has moved. I think starting end of March towards the full April, May, June quarter, there's been a big flux in the way people, organizations, institutions, governments operated across the country. And a country of our scale and size, I think one of the most important things, thankfully, because of all our joint efforts, and I'm talking government, industry, operators, vendors, academia for the point Abhay was making, is we've been able to harness what is technically known as the elasticity of the network to ensure that we move in the right direction and we still serve our customers in spite of this big, huge change in traffic. In fact, overnight when the lockdown was declared, we suddenly saw the shape of the traffic patterns and the size of the traffic patterns changed radically over 24 hours. And within those 24 hours, almost each one of us as operators, anyone in the industry actually moved mountainous efforts towards realigning the network components to use this elasticity. We re-optimized, we moved electrical tilts, we moved capacity, we moved caches, and all of that was moved centrally from a digital operations perspective, because physical operations were all extremely restricted. Now this has given us 2-3 big learnings. First of all, one of the biggest learning which we've kind of picked up over the last 3-4 months is the awareness of this traffic pattern and the awareness of the consumption and the customer behavior, I think, will play going forward. And as the use cases become more diverse, it will go beyond voice and data. What is happening on the ground and how is the connectivity getting consumed, that awareness will play the single most important role in creating the next generation network. And 5G from that perspective, I think, will play significantly important role, because it is designed to service those kind of multifaceted service portfolios or service bouquets. So that's point number one. And this is what we call as the whole networked intelligence piece, wherein understanding the customer behavior, understanding the network performance, correlating them digitally over a big data platform, and then taking those digital decisions will harness this whole elasticity of the network. The second big thing which actually came up as a learning is digital collaboration from a way of working will become extremely important going forward. In fact, the sea change in the shift, the way organizations will operate, people will operate, and this is cutting across all genres. You're talking about education, you're talking about health, you're talking about even manufacturing to a large extent, retail, of course, from a commerce perspective, banking. All of these will now move towards a non-discretized mode of action. And this whole non-discretized mode of action will actually play a more important role when the underlying connectivity gives you those kind of diverse enablement, which I think 4G has given to a large extent, but just by the way the architecture of 5G is designed. Actually, this makes me recall what happened in the electrical industry almost 100 years back. If you recall, at the advent of 20th century, early 1900s, electricity started coming to the houses, and it was used for industry earlier in the last part of 19th century, but 1910, 1915 kind of period, most of the houses in the West got electrified. But at that point of time, the electricity was only servicing the households for light. And I remember this big campaign somebody told me over internet, Sears as the marketing company, they rolled out this spring 1917 catalog, when they claimed as one marketing campaign saying, use your electricity for more than light. And one of the fundamental changes that drove, and one of the fundamental discoveries that drove this using electricity for more than light was discovery of something which we now know as sockets. Sockets did not exist when electricity started. But in 1917, 18, 20, when sockets came, the whole use case of electricity moved from lighting the houses to creating a plethora of appliances, starting from toasters and washing machines and shoe shiners and whatever you call it at that point of time. Now 5G, I believe, almost 100 years hence, will actually be the socket for the new age digital world. And this is the socket which cross-industry collaborative forces like education, like medicine, they will use. And they will then build their own use cases, which will definitely go much more beyond classical connectivity syndrome. And this is where the whole realization of 5G in its true sense will come to fore, when from a connectivity based service industry, it will actually become a use case or an application or a vertical driven industry. We're already talking about Industry 4.0. We are talking about captive networks for manufacturing sites. We are talking about end-to-end digital education channels, medicine towards the last mile across board. The other big thing in a diverse country like India it is going to bring is it will democratize the expertise. I mean, look at people like Abhay. How many people can now reach out to his expertise, understand his knowledge, and seek those lectures which he can give today beyond the campus. Now, once this gets democratized, I think you will not need to move from your house, your home in the farthest parts of the countries. And you will still be able to kind of interact, transact, and learn and understand. This will hold true for doctors. This will hold true for marketing gurus, for management, for governance. So I think this whole opening up of the connectivity platform towards getting the industry and cross-industry collaboration will exponentially change the game, the way we look at this whole telecom industry going forward.
So, Mr. Babu, has the government started taking more efforts after the COVID to bring 5G to reality? Because we are now awaiting 5G trials to kick off, and all the telcos have on record said that they have prepared their networks, they are ready with the preparation. So, what is your stance? Are there some use cases which are making government prepone things or maybe change the timeline for the 5G in India?
So thanks for asking the question, Danish. It's a very important one because ultimately when we want to try a usage case in the real-time environment, yes, there's a lot of like having an idea in the lab and developing a prototype as well as finding a business case out of it and then trying in the network, then coming out with required regulatory regime, how we can make it happen commercially in a big way. All these things go in sequence. You are very right. And just, apart from answering your question, I also want to add, myself and Professor Abhay have been in the journey of, that enabling the spectrum, especially for experimentation as well as test bed, I should say for the last 3 years, where we started first with HLF recommendations. There was a task force. Then, as he rightly mentioned, to enable this development of usage cases as well as wireless test beds and as well as wireless products. In fact, I want to take this opportunity to give a kind of right, what's called visibility to the, to the industry. That July 23rd, that is 2019, communication from Department of Telecom about this unified policy framework for experimentation, technology trials, R&D, as well as demo and manufacturing. This is one of the, I should say, epoch-marking, in enabling spectrum for R&D and wireless development technologies is one of the very important step which has enabled testbeds. Now I'm sure that even industry members here, Nokia as well as Reliance as well as JUio and others who have taken this opportunity of establishing testbeds. Many other companies who are using this, what's called ease of getting the spectrum for R&D with affordable cost, like with $65 a year, they can get any amount of spectrum as well as in any band. They can do for wireless testing, which has become one of the strong inputs in developing usage cases using 5G for different areas, as Shyam has mentioned earlier. Now, with regard to this technology trials as well as usage case development, very recently we had another round of discussion with industry members and as well as several members of NASSCOM as well as other industry members, where we have seen a significant opportunity to bring academia, who are working in different key areas. I can call them as, in application domain as well as the core domains, which may be having relevance for 5G. Plus, there are many MITs, Ministry of Electronics and IT has got several centers of excellence, name it in automobile, name it health, education, AR, VR, agriculture. We have identified certain centers of excellence. And we are also going to discuss with OEMs as well as telecom service providers to come together and take forward this engagement, especially through the centers of excellence. Parallelly, this testbed will be getting ready to give access to these centers of excellence. And of course, I mean, the industry as well as the OEMs, they have been very generous in offering even their testbed infrastructure. As Randeep mentioned that startups and SMEs can use the access and take this forward. I can say that there's a good amount of traction among all the stakeholders, to identify as well as mature the usage cases and this technology trials in outdoor environment. The discussion and deliberations are already, are in a very advanced stages of finalization. So I'm sure all together we look forward rapid deployment in these usage cases and maturing those models.
So, Mr. Karandikar, from an academia perspective, we have seen that globally also a lot of universities are involved in developing these 5G use cases with the help of stakeholders and the students that are studying in those institutes. So, in India also, have we seen some innovation coming up in those institutes where government is providing support and the telcos and OEMs are also instrumental in providing the infra support?
I mean, absolutely. As I said, that the 5G testbed which is getting developed is more than 200 crores project which is being funded by the DoT, and lot of not only just the use cases but even the component building up is going on in different IITs and the R&D labs. And as Kishore Babu also mentioned, that as a part of 5G hackathon, we have seen extraordinary number of entries by students and other youths across the country in different domains with very interesting ideas. So that actually shows that there are a lot of students and a lot of efforts in all directions with number of ideas. But I think I would just say here one thing that which Jimmy mentioned, that in India the primary device now to access the broadband is a cell phone, and because we don't have that much wireline connectivity, which is all pervasive. In fact, the cell phone was the primary phone for many people for using voice communications. In fact, unlike in the Western world, in the US or in the Europe, where the cell phone's primary motivation was mobility, otherwise, everyone had access to the wired phone. In India, the cell phones actually became the primary phones for voice and later on the primary device to access the broadband. So therefore, this enhanced mobile broadband use case of the 5G will continue to dominate, a very important use case in, our country's perspective for the initial deployment of the 5G. And as this broadband connectivity, as the digital connectivity will spread to other domains like, education, healthcare, transportations, agriculture, those domain experts themselves, and they need not be, communication experts or 5G experts, as Shyam mentioned, they will come up with applications and use cases which we cannot even really think of by sitting here. Really, and that would be the second wave of the applications and the use cases. The first wave, of course, I believe will continue to be providing a extremely good mobile broadband sort of experience to the users, which will look like as if, users are getting an experience of fiber to the home. Once we get, that kind of experience, then, the other applications and use cases will automatically develop as a part of the follow-up use cases as the digital connectivity really spreads.
Sure. So my next question is something which is related to JUio, but I would like to ask that question to the vendors that we have, Nokia and Ribbon. It's about the 5G stack that JUio has said that they have developed for the Indian market, and in future they would want to take it to the global markets. So Randeep, I would like to understand from you, how important is it for India to have technology which has been grown in-house, and Telco is building the whole stack with the close integration of software with the hardware, the decoupling of the hardware, and involving all those open source components. What do you think about this whole approach, and how, as a traditional vendor, you see this whole development in the Indian market?
Of course, Danish, this is a very interesting question, and industry is, is talking big time about it, of having an in-house, gear versus, gear supplied by the traditional vendors. Of course, operators have their own strategies in terms of how to deploy 5G, and 5G technology gives you that flexibility to deploy the way you want it, whether you want to go with an NSA architecture or SA architecture. And of course, we have seen certain aspirations from the operators to get into the space because of the open interfaces and open standards that are coming our way. While yes, we do see it with two different lenses. One is, as a traditional gear supplier, and then second lens is looking at these as an opportunity for ourselves. And we are not, I must say, bound by one or the other. Depending upon the operator strategy, whom we partner with, we are always flexible to adopt that as part of our game plan and portfolio with them. But we see a good uprise in this thought process among operators, that they want to have their own stack because they want a good control on the network. And also, we have also seen that virtualization of the networks gives that, I must say, leeway for the customers or operators to get into that space, because it's more or less now software driven, very less dependency on the hardware. So it's easy to make, versus what it used to be, a few years back. But I must say that, vendors like us, we have been in this industry for the last 25, 30 years now. And we know how the R&D operates. And for the operators who are planning in this, I think they also need to understand and learn in terms of how the R&D interfaces, in terms of getting the complexities of that developed in-house, have to be addressed. And as I said, that we see it as an opportunity, as a matter of fact, because we have an end-to-end portfolio from Nokia standpoint. It's not just about radio and 5G, as Mr. Kishore Babu was also saying, that it's not just a technology, it's an evolution of a network from where we are today on 4G, and opening a connectivity layer to different domains of the industries, including the enterprise. So from a OEM or a partner to the customer standpoint, so we definitely see it as an opportunity, because we do see that there are complementary areas where we can leverage each other's strength. It's not just that they are competing with us, or we are becoming a competitor to our operators. With the kind of broad portfolio that we have, cutting across radio core, IMS voltage, software, I do believe that there are a lot of areas where the leverage can be done, and a complementary, I must say, collaborations could be taken forward.
Sure. So Jimmy, do you have an understanding? I'm sure you must be following the development as well in the market. What do you think about this whole approach of developing by yourself with the help of newer technologies like Open RAN, open source, Cloud RAN? How do you see this whole new approach being taken by the telecom operators? Not just in India, but Rakuten in Japan has also done that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I fully agree with this approach, and this is the direction that we are in Ribbon is heading as well. The market is changing. 5G will change completely the network architecture. We are looking at the network architecture, for example. We see evolution of the RAN to virtualize and open. We see cloudification of the core. We see disaggregation of the core function, and creation and distributed core and radio function. So the entire architecture is changing. We'll see virtualization is scaling down to the edge of the network in order to support some of the services that require quick response time. The architecture of the network will change also in respect to how to manage it. And we're expecting the network to be managed according to SDN architecture and SDN orchestration. Why is that? There are two main reasons. One, we are working in multi-vendor environment and multi-layer environment. These days, before the 5G, it takes more time to support a new services. In 5G via the SDN orchestration. We can define a new service end-to-end across the layer, across the different vendor, much faster and automated than we can do it in the previous generation. So the entire market is changing. We'll have to support new, more complicated application and use cases. Some of them will require very high time and accuracy. Some of them require very low latency, which definitely require the network to evolve in terms of the disaggregation, in terms of interoperability between the vendor. And I believe this is the right approach. The telecom operator should have the choice to choose the best of breed for each of the technology. If he hook to specific type of solution, he cannot pick the building block and deploy it in the network. 5G is more complicated than 4G and the previous generation. And we want to make sure that we are picking the right best of breed building block to deploy our network. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that it works smoothly across the network from the management perspective, as well as the network itself. So definitely this is the approach that the market is heading. And I think that in the next few years as 5G will start to deploy, we'll see it getting together.
So Reliance JUio, for instance, has been termed as the clean telco by the US government. Among the few clean telcos, even FCC chairman Ajit Pai also talked about it. So Mr. Mardikar, what do you have to say about the security aspect of it, not just in 4G, but in 5G? Are we going to see more concerns around security and how JUio is ensuring that the network remains clean as well as secured and immune to all those attacks that we may see in the market? What do you have to say on that?
Anish, I think this is most probably one of the most critical and one of the most understated topics of discussion when we're talking about technology, especially in communication technology. What happens is, and just to give some kind of perspective to the scale of it, some of the last global reports which are available, the world consumed close to 4,700 crore GBs of data on a monthly basis, talking about the last 2-3 months of consumption, which is the latest consumption, July or August consumption. And out of that 4,700 crore GBs of consumption, we at Reliance JUio, just as a single operator, actually contributed around 500 crores of GB, which is more than 10% or 11-12% of the total global consumption. And if I now look at the India consumption, in fact, we do have the lion's share. We do close to 2/3 of data in India. But even looking at that 2/3 of data, if I extend this 500 crore to 700-800 crore, we are doing almost 15 to 16% of global data. Now, why this number is important is that at this scale, and both Abhay and Kishorji also mentioned the propensity of rise of this data because of the enhanced MBB use case, which will come up in 5G. This is going to kind of multiply by an order of magnitude. Now, if this happens, there are 2-3 places which are at stake. One is the customer data itself. I mean, you've got nearly 1 billion mobile phones across the country now consuming this kind of data. What happens to the security of the data itself, both from a privacy and a data protection perspective? And second, what happens to the systemic data which these connectivity platforms, which we operators build together, are kind of carrying? These not only carry data from a payload perspective, there are geographical nuances, there are distribution nuances around where our network nodes are, where our network data is stored. These are inherently linked with the general trade and industry of the country. You're talking about banks, you're talking about government organizations and hospitals. So I think, and the more disaggregated and the more programmable the network becomes, the threats become multifold, because earlier, like in the old age, when we had a monolithic network nodes and we had only one set of input output IO as we call it, the one single wire trap around that IO could either make or break that system. So accessing was either very easy or very difficult, and if you can plug those holes to those limited number of points, you could have ensured that the network was secure. Now, because of the various capabilities, including application, man in the middle kind of scenarios, OS layer, device layer capabilities, open cloud capabilities, the extent to which the threats and the vulnerabilities in the network gets exposed are multifold. One of the most important things which we are trying to do, I think most of the companies do it, but the amount of structure and the amount of thought that needs to go into it is more important, is how do you create a information security, data security organization and wrappers around it? How do you make sure that the access control mechanism, right from issues as mundane as password and logging control to as complicated as crawlers and patch upgrades and things like that within the subsystem or OS layers of the network itself. This sounds complicated, but the point I'm trying to drive here is, unless the organization has a know-how of the vulnerabilities, I think it will be very, very difficult for them to protect the company, protect the organization or the network from those vulnerabilities. So one of the important aspects of this whole network security and information security to get to this tag of a clean organization is to be brutally aware of anything which this network can expose, right from the physical layer to the application layer, and what are the potential aspects of that, and then create a very, very clear policy-driven execution. This starts with the selection of partners, this starts with selection of technology, this starts with selection of hardware, software, distribution, topology, and all of that. I think we are ourselves as JUio very proud of the fact that we take disproportionate amount of effort and put in disproportionate amount of resources to make sure that the network and services which we provide to our customers and to the country are protected in the right earnest, are validated in the right earnest, and more important, we are continuously updated and aware of any threats and vulnerabilities that the system would cause. And this is again given to my earlier point when we started. 5G will definitely be a step higher from a complexity perspective, and so a step more exposed from a threat and vulnerability perspective. So once this process gets much more ratified, much more kind of getting inside the system itself from a awareness perspective, that will give us the value, that will give us the power to ensure that what we are doing is totally secure, totally protected, and we can continue to claim ourselves as one of the cleanest telcos on the globe.
Yeah. So Mr. Babu, I would like to seek your views on security, and Mr. Karandikar, your views as well. One, we are developing our own standard, TSDSI and telcos are involved. Secondly, the use cases are being built by Indians in India. So is security a crucial element where governments and academia's focus is also going towards?
I think perhaps I can start and then Professor Karandikar can take it forward. As Shyam mentioned that, security is one of the, I should say important as well as a complex issue, especially when it comes to 5G. As Randeep as well as Mizrahi also mentioned, it's not a simple network or infrastructure, because especially end-to-end orchestration to ensure the specific capabilities of 5G to make them available for usage cases and applications is one of the very critical parameter which perhaps gives a renewed importance about why security to be taken care, because it's going to touch upon everything in the, what I should say, the objects, what they may come into play in the 5G infrastructure. And second thing is, we also know that as we see the 3GPP developments as well as new work items, 5G is going to work across the platforms, across the devices, and across different access technologies as well. So, but however, 3GPP also mentions that, while working the standards and recommendations, they took care of, reasonable security, protections, as part of the standard development and as well as the technologies used. But at the same time, what is unknown is going to create, a lot of, doubt as well as renewed efforts. What is that we should do, and really looking at a kind of advanced estimation of different elements behavior, as well as devices behavior, what they're going to react, what is happening, not a normal or abnormal, traffic flow, as well as, movement of data, etc. There are efforts to bring in big data analytics as well as AI to ensure and strengthen the current security processes as well as, that work items. I can say that. But of course, it's not a kind where we have developed a standard and we are going to stop it. It's going to be a continuous, effort from all of us to enhance the new workflows as well as operating procedures as well as to standard, operational protocols to enhance the, security part of it. So with this, of course, I request Professor Abhay to add more as a technology expert.
Yeah, I think he rightly mentioned. In fact, the last part is important, like he mentioned. So I think one thing is that the 5G increasing softwareizations and things like network function virtualizations, while has made the network more flexible, it has also posed additional security challenges. Which were so while today, for example, with the softwareizations and network function virtualizations, you could run the networks on off-the-shelf hardware and make it more flexible, create more services easily. It also leads to a lot of security concern. Of course, as long as the 3GPP standards are concerned, many of these security protocols and security issues are getting addressed in the standards bodies, and they are getting sort of standardized. But there is two levels of things. One is at the application level, also security will become important. And as the number of use cases and applications increase, there is a, increasing need for the application level security. Secondly, I think at the organization itself, and I think Shyam rightly mentioned, I think it is very important issue of the organization itself being sensitive and cognizant of developing this information security framework, across levels, and which just doesn't mean in the networks, but which also means in the organization itself. So this will also, will be the step towards, making the network more secure. And I think last point, I think which Kishore Babu briefly touched on is going to be increasingly important is the use of advanced techniques based on AI and machine learning to introduce, online monitoring of the networks and interventions as we see. And this is, I think, going to become, I think, more important. So we are going to see more tools and techniques which will get developed, which also make use of the fact that the networks are actually getting more and more softwareized and virtualized. So I think those are at the networks level and at the protocols levels. But I think from the organization level as well, and finally, the application developers and use case developers also have to be really cognizant of the increasing security concerns.
Sure.
And these concerns even become important as the network, spreads across domains. It's not just restricted to online banking or transactions or just broadband services, but we are now talking of its IoT applications and Industry 4.0 and going into the agriculture and healthcare sectors. Then actually it poses, more challenges.
So Randeep, maybe last quick comments from you and Jimmy. Being vendors be more responsible about ensuring security, or telcos should be more responsible about ensuring security in the networks? So where does the conversation start?
I think, of course, Danish, it has to be both. It's not just one party or other. Security cuts across the the products and the services. And we in Nokia are predominantly, servicing the solutions that we supply to our customers. And we are bound by stringent standardization that 3GPP has enforced in terms of the security specifications. And we do expect that with the advent of IoT and objects coming onto the networks, further enhancements on those are proposed as part of release 16 to make 5G networks more secure and more safe. But I have always been of the opinion that it's not only about the radio, because mostly the security has always been linked to the radio because it's an access layer and that's where a vulnerability exists. But it's also about an end-to-end security practice which operators have to follow in terms of relooking into their own security, I must say, structure that they have in their organization, and also strengthen their end-to-end security infrastructure while also taking benefits of the 3GPP specification. So it is both. We at Nokia are ensuring that the products that we supply to our customers are safe, are secure, so that they can serve the services of the consumers very safely and securely.
Sure.
And from India standpoint, we are also very actively participating in the DoT initiative of ITSAR, where there is a regime of security which will come into play, and actively participating in ensuring that whatever final specifications in terms of those draft ITSARs are framed, we comply to those. Our job here is to provide a safe and secure technology to our customers and partners, and we feel proud in saying that we are one of the leading vendors in ensuring the compliance to the security standards.
Sure. So Jimmy, maybe quick 2 or 3 lines on security from you, then we can wrap this discussion up.
Yeah, 5G is the most strategic asset will be in the next 2-3 years, as much as power grid. Why? Because if you are looking on the previous generation, 4G and 3G, the focus was on the consumer and personal communication. When you're looking on 5G, it's not only the consumer, we are talking about the enterprises, we are talking about Internet of Things. Everything will be rely, control, and monitor by the 5G network. So it's not anymore just for communication. It's becoming everything that we have in the country would be managed eventually by 5G. So I think, in my view, 5G may be the most important feature that you have to take into consideration when you're developing a 5G network. To your question, whose responsibility is? So it's both starting with the vendor. You have to make sure that you develop a network in your domain that is fully secure. I can tell you that the standard has lots of concern about how to protect a 5G network, and an attack can come from completely different direction, even from the packet switching. We are in the business of packet and optics, so in packet switching elements, how you protect that the attacks from one slice will not move to another slice, how you protect it, because then if it moves from one slice to another, you become vulnerable within the network. So in our domain, we see security as a key feature, more even the regular function. So you have to make sure that the network is there, but also the operator, because at the end of the day, we are developing a network which combines a variety of vendors, and virtualization become a major issue, as mentioned before. And it's not only a physical network element, it's a software. And software, by definition, is more vulnerable to attack than in a hardware. So it's both responsible for it, and I can share with you that we are fully cooperating with our customer on this issue and communicating, and this is how it should be.
So Mr. Babu, you have some last concluding comments to make. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Danish. And I want to reiterate that 5G is not there's not one stakeholder. It's a collaboration of across the stakeholders who have to work together. And I see very good amount of traction among all of us to ensure that the 5G is rolled out with vigor as well as rapid pace. And I also want to add here one thing, while thanking all the global majors like Nokia and as well as telecom service provider Reliance. There's good amount of traction in the country in developing 5G products and technologies. In fact, the dynamic knowledge transfer among the employees as well as the competencies between institutions has really triggered development of edge products. Even in the core technologies of 5G, there's a good amount of progress in the country. I encourage, I request, the OEMs as well as the operators as well as academia to support these, green shoots in the technology domain, the startups and SMEs, and give them a chance for trials as well as the pilots, in a campus environment, which helps us, all of us, in a big way to focus on more complex development of next generation technologies.
So, Mr. Mardikar, last comment, last line, if you would like to summarize 5G and the development in India, if you could, please go ahead.
I believe it's a very, very bright future and at the right time, which is hitting us in this country at this point of time, Danish. So really, as part of the industry, as part of this great journey, we are looking forward towards a great fundamental change, sea change in the way people in India, industries in India, enterprises in India communicate, and converting this to a really, really digital India, which works seamlessly and becomes a showcase of the next generation life and next generation society to the world.
Thanks, Mr. Mardikar. Thanks, Mr. Karandikar, Mr. Babu, Mr. Mizrahi, and Mr. Raina. Thank you very much for this insightful session. And there are, I'm sure, a lot of learnings to take away from this discussion. Thank you very much once again. Thanks.
Thank you, Danish.
Thank you, panelists, for deep delving into the topic. Stay tuned for ET Telecom Awards 2020.